I was homeless, Ari, and you have to figure out where the opportunity is because when things start to crash, there's always an opportunity. I tried so many different things and I failed so many different times. Like, even if you like, wow, $3 million net worth, I look at it as nothing, Ari. And then I heard Kevin O'Leary say that he would never buy a stock unless it had a dividend, and I was sold. For me, every day I buy stocks every day. I don't care if it's $5 a VO. I'm gonna buy something every day because for me, it's like I'm getting richer. We live in a society now where people want to look rich and not necessarily be rich. The amount of people who just they won't even get started. Like, I only can spare $50, then invest the $50. I only have $100, then invest $100. Most people, the wealth class that you're born into, fortunately, you kind of die into it. So if you're born, in a lower class, a lot of times, not all times, right, but a lot of times, pass into that class as well. And I didn't want to. I didn't want that.
Investors, welcome back to another go-round of Masters of the Market. This week, I am incredibly excited to have on with me Marvin Jones. He has been in the Navy for over 20 years, starting off his career in the Marines, then into the Navy there. But here's the deal when it comes to Marvin. He has total of 7 figures worth of a net worth. And so somehow, some way, he's been able to go from almost absolutely nothing to acquiring wealth and beyond. Now, Marvin, I first want to welcome you to Masters of the Market. And I just want to pass the first question right over to you to ask you, how exactly did you get to where you are today?
First, Ari, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you again having me on the show. And so I came from humble beginnings. My parents, they were both 16 when they had me. I was the oldest, the eldest son, and so life for me was probably different than most of the people that or maybe grew up with. I did a lot of different things, a lot of odd jobs growing up as a child because I never wanted my mom to have to worry about me or me buying me school clothes, things of that sort. I grew up homeless for a bit in Baltimore and in Virginia, and there was a guy in my neighborhood when I was young, about maybe 10 years old, who used to sell fish door to door, and I asked my mom to talk to him for me and asked him could I sell fish for him, and he agreed. And so I used to sell fish door to door, like trout, spot. I used to sell shrimp, crabs, knocking on people's doors, asking them, could I uh, potentially sell them fish? And some people were just so amazed that I was like so young and knocking on their door trying to sell them a bag of fish. I think out of pity, they just, would buy a couple bags from me or whatever. But I made money. The guy's name was Johnny. I made money with Johnny, and I used to work with him during the summers and even on the weekends while I was at school. Later on in my life, when I turned about 14, I went to live with my dad. But as soon as I moved in with my dad, he had just gotten out of prison. And, soon after, he was going through a divorce with my stepmom or whatever. And I saw him going through his struggle, whereas though, he just came home from jail. He's struggling to make a living. And now he's going through a divorce. And so the same thing, I didn't want him to have to worry about me because he needed to take care of my sisters. And so, I used to, do odd jobs for people. And then my grandmother, she bought me a lawnmower. And she told me, as long as you cut my grass every week, you have this lawnmower. And so I took the lawnmower and I used to knock on doors and I used to ask people, could I cut their grass? Back then I would come and I would cut your lawn, your front yard and your backyard and trim your hedges for about $10. Those prices are insane today. I think I pay like $100 for a kid to come do all that for me, right? And so when I was, growing up, I didn't think much about it until like, I got older. People were like, man, you really went through all of that. Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, man, yeah, I did go through all that. But I'm thankful for it because it just gave me this crazy work ethic. Like I have, even in my 40s now, I still have a ton of energy to go after whatever it is I want in life. I've never, even as an adult now, I've never looked for anyone to take care of me. And in a way, yeah, it's a little bit sad that as a kid you weren't looking for people to take care of you because as a child, my kids are pretty spoiled, right? Like I overtake care of them really. But for me as a kid, right, I would always just figure out a way to go and make it happen. Like I couldn't even tell you I think maybe the last time someone bought me school clothes, I was maybe 13 or 14. Right. After that, like I figured it out. And I've taken that same work ethic and I've applied it to like everything in my life that if I truly want something or if something is on my agenda, if I write it down on my list, I'm gonna go after it and I'm gonna figure it out.
Marvin, at what age did you join the military, the Marine Corps at that point in time, correct?
Yeah, so I was 18. So again, I was a terrible student. In high school, I graduated with less than a 2.0 grade point average. I think I graduated maybe like a 1.7. And actually, I never really graduated. I didn't even walk across the stage, and no one in my family even batted an eye or even asked me for a diploma or anything. And so, I was, getting into trouble. I was going to college a little bit. I was, working a little bit, but I wasn't doing anything significant. And so a buddy of mine actually came home from Marine Corps boot camp and asked me to talk to the recruiter for him. And I thought about joining the reserves, and they were like, "No, you probably should leave Baltimore." So yeah, I got on the next thing smoking, and I went to the Marine Corps. While I was in the Marine Corps, I had a really good leader. His name was Michael Tippett. And he put the seed in me to start saving. He made me set up bank account with Bank of Hawaii, stationed in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, Marine Corps base Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii at the time. Um, and, and I would just put away $100. And he was like, don't get an ATM card, just let it, build up over time. And I would buy savings bonds. And then later on, when the TSP was introduced to the military community. I would invest in the TSP. And so over my 8 years in the Marine Corps, I was able to save up, a decent amount of money. So when I got out, after 8 years, and I went back home to Baltimore, I had a little bit of money in my pocket. That was the first go around, but I ended up messing all that money up. We can talk about that later.
Sure, that's definitely something we're gonna dive into. But you went back in, correct? Because now you're in the Navy, you're still active duty, and I want to put that on record for everybody. So first of all, thank you for your service to the country, continued service, and we all really appreciate it. There's no words, and even the service you're doing for us right now on Masters of the Market while on active duty. I got to ask you, where in the world do you get all of this time, right, to go from an active duty soldier to investing to jumping on a podcast like this? How do you make the time? Where does this energy come from?
You make the time for things that you want, right? Or the goals that you set for yourself, right? If you want to get something done, you'll make a way. And if you really don't want to get it done, you'll make an excuse. So for me, I think it's about being organized. And sometimes I may not necessarily be the most organized person, but I am, one thing God has blessed me with is for me to be able to get focused. Like when I'm ready to do something and ready to get focused on it, I literally write my day down in quarters of things that I want to accomplish. Like, okay, by 10, these five things need to be done. By, 2 o'clock, these things need to be done. I have a podcast I need to do at 8 o'clock. I need to study for 1 hour between 8:30 and 9:30. 10 o'clock, I need to be in bed. You know, five, I need to be up. 5:30, I need to be at the gym. So I think the military, I was, pretty disciplined. I think as far as like when I wanted to do something, I mean, you got to be pretty disciplined to go and sell fish door to door. But the military really, especially being in the Marines, really instilled a lot of discipline in me. That when you make a goal, you don't stop until it's complete. And I've like applied that to my life as well, and it's done well for me. And even at times where I have setbacks or face adversity, I can always lean back on those earlier experiences of being poor and being in the Marine Corps, being homeless, things of that sort. Like I never want to go back to that. Even now, I'm not saying it's impossible for me to go back to that because you never know, right? But it's taken a lot of fear out of my life to go in and try new things because I've already been through so much that going and losing some money on some dividend stocks or investing in crypto or real estate or whatever, it's like, I'll be all right.
Sure. I love that mentality. And I want to ask, I mean, at this point where you are right now, we'll put this on record so everyone can get this before we proceed. Net worth wise and portfolio value wise, where do you stand? You can ballpark it.
And so net worth wise with, stocks and real estate, it's, a little bit over 3 million, $3 million. And then stocks themselves, upward over about 1 million.
Almost no words because I almost feel like, and I almost, there's a stigma, right, too, that goes along with a lot of guys that go into service. And then, right, it's almost like a lot of people feel like or think, right, that if you go and serve, you can't make the millions. And so to me, what sparked me to jump on with you is your entire story, but it literally is this message of it's all possible. It all can be done. And I'd love to ask you, how did you get started and how throughout your investment journey have you transformed? What type of investor are you today and how'd you get started? Because to get to over 3 million, right, and be active duty military, I mean, you're not an investment banker, right? Um, you're sharing that you're really from the University of Hard Knocks, it sounds like. And so a lot of people would argue like, no way, that can't be done.
Ari, it can be done, right? But I think that you have to think outside the box a little bit, and you have to be willing to sacrifice. All right, so I'll back up a little bit. So I got out of the Marine Corps. I worked for Target as a executive team lead of logistics. I worked in the Maryland, DC district. It was a pretty good job. I made pretty decent money at the time. Things were going well, but then the market crashed. When the market crashed, my 401k, crashed. And when I got out of the Marine Corps as well, I started trying to flip houses. So I got stuck with two houses, couldn't sell them. Essentially went into foreclosure for one, and I pretty much wholesaled, sorry, the other. So I didn't make any money. I lost a ton of money. And so I was in shambles. And so for me, I was like, well, I got those 8 years I spent in the Marine Corps. Why not go back into the Navy and finish my retirement? But this time, by this time I had finished my degree. When I was in the Marines, I finished my bachelor's degree. I went to night school at Hawaii Pacific University. In between deployments, I would take classes here and there. And when I went to my new unit in Hawaii, I knew I wouldn't deploy for 2 years. So during that 2 years, I went to school 6 to 10, Monday through Friday. And then I took Saturday and Sunday classes. Sometimes I would go to school all day Saturday and Sunday if they offered the courses that I needed at the time. So I ended up still I finished my degree in about maybe 3 years, maybe not even just purely just going to school. And literally I was taking so much of a load that at times I would have to go negotiate with the teachers like, listen, I'm taking a crazy load. What do I have to do to get a C so that I don't have to pay the government back this money for paying for this course? Yeah. I was an accounting major. And so, sometimes I would show up class late, but I would always have my work done. I would always do what I needed to do to pass the class and eventually, graduate. So then fast forward, I finished my master's when I got out the Marines. So when I applied to come into the Navy, I already had my bachelor's and my master's. So I applied to become an officer. I was accepted and I went to officer candidate school for the Navy in May of 2008. And I was commissioned in August of 2008 as a surface warfare officer in the Navy. And the rest is history from there. Now I'm a commander. I've been a commanding officer once. I most likely have the opportunity to end again here soon in the next couple of years. And life is great. So now to today, like, how did I amass the portfolio? So I'm the type of person that I kind of never stop. I'm like a shark. Like I'm still swimming even when I'm sleeping, right? So throughout my career, I've always made extra money. I've taught adjunct college. So I taught for Central Texas College. I've taught for UMUC. I've done mentorship services, which I still kind of do now, but I only usually take on like two people at a time. But I just don't have the time for it. I really just want to help people. So I don't really charge much for that, right? I've had a lawn care business where my son and I would go and cut yards. Um, I've bought, real estate, buy and hold real estate where I buy just 2 bedroom, 2 baths, or 2 bedroom, 1 baths, uh, homes or condos. And as all this money is coming in, the money never sleeps. I put it to work somewhere else. So the money I would get from growth stocks, I would cash it out, take that money, use it as deposits for real estate. The money I get from my real estate business, I take 2 draws a year mostly, and I invest that back into stocks and dividend stocks. Like the money just never sleeps. And then you think the money that I make from the Navy, it gives me an opportunity to max out the TSP. So I think this year maybe the max is I think maybe 23,000. But I've been maxing out for years on end. So it's about maybe a half a million just in TSP. Uh, so yeah, I don't really necessarily need all the money from the Navy. Another thing that I did to help me get to the point where I'm at is that I never really bought a lot of new cars. If I could afford a house that was $700,000 or $800,000, I would buy a house that was $200,000 or $300,000. The house that I live in now, I bought it in 2011. So the houses in my neighborhood have the prices have doubled, but my mortgage is still like $1,400. And I'm making a lot more money than that right now, right? So I don't and a three or $4,000, $5,000 mortgage just to impress, other people. I usually spend money when I do splurge on experiences, like go to Puerto Rico for the weekend or that. You can do it in the military, but you have to be in a position where as though you don't live above your means, if that makes sense.
Now, it sounds like, I mean, even before you got into the military, whether it was the Marine Corps or the Navy, you had this, I want to say, predisposition to succeed and for success. Like the drive was on. What do you think, just looking back now, during your time in the military, your upbringing, what would you say was like the key driver for you? Was it the University of Hard Knocks experiences? Was it having the mentors? Like, what was kind of the key for you?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of all of that, right? So when you come from humble beginnings and, and I have people in my family who, looked out for me. I have an aunt that really, did her best to try to, help me out at times. I got an uncle who's a millionaire, but we can hardly get in touch with him. but I think it was a little bit of all of it. I think that I knew I would have probably have to come back and help take care of my parents. Having me so young, I would, you know, a lot of their lives, most of their lives were raising, kids. Um, and they never really graduated to that next asset class or next wealth class, right? So most people, the wealth class that you're born into, it, unfortunately you kind of die into it. So if you're born in a lower class, a lot of times, not all times, right, but a lot of times, pass into that class as well. And I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want that for anyone that I love. And I kind of wanted to just be able to be in a position where I could, help give back to my community and take care of everyone. I just didn't know how to do it, but I knew I was just willing to do whatever it took. Um, I tried so many different things and I failed so many different times. Like even if you like, wow, $3 million net worth, I look at it as nothing, Ari. I look at it as nothing. I look at it like I should be up another 2 mil. I look at it as I had a guy that was trying to sell me 2 5-unit apartments for about 300 grand a piece at the time. And I could have just cashed out some stocks and, bought both of them. If I told you how much they were worth now and how much equity I would have in them now, that was a bad decision on my part, right? So, going back to like, what motivates me is just knowing that I'll never go back to the way that I grew up. I'll never, have to eat, ramen unless I want to, or we were on, government assistance. You get a can of pork and it's like a pig. It's like a pig on there. You get a can of peanut butter. It's like a little peanut man on there. I'll never have to do that again. Although those were some good times. I had something to eat, so it's not like I was starving, right? But I just wanted more. I
Sure.
see it. I just wanted more.
Where do you think, I'm going to say the younger generations or just even investors in general go south? Where do we go wrong? What's the most common mistake?
I think it's a lot, right? I'll narrow it down to a couple. One, fear of just getting started. The amount of people who just they won't even get started. It's like, oh, I only can spare $50, then invest the $50. I only have $100, then invest $100. I'll give you one or two funds, or ETFs, or stocks. Just go hard on just that. I think that we live in a society now where people want to look rich and not necessarily be rich. So, like I have a Rolex on right now, right? I see people, and this is like a splurge for me, right? And this is like a lower level. I'll see someone who I know doesn't make the money to actually afford that, and will go and put it on a credit card and will be paying on it for 10 years. So, well, imagine not making that purchase and not making $100 or $200 payment for a Rolex watch that you're probably going to end up having to hop later anyway because you can't really afford it, and taking that money and investing it, or not wearing that Burberry outfit, or not buying that Burberry outfit, or that Louis Vuitton like designer tennis shoes, clothes. You have you're living in a high rise. You're barely out of college, and you're trying to buy a $600,000 home. Like, for me, that's asinine, right? But some people would rather look as if they have it instead of just. If you look at all of my videos on TikTok, I'm usually wearing either a black V-neck or a black T-shirt. Most of the time, Under Armour or maybe Hanes. I could care less about clothes. I only buy things of quality, and I use the money that I have to make more money. And so, the other thing I think that young investors uh, don't do is kind of back to what I said originally. They don't change their mindset. You have to really change your mindset and educate yourself. For me, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. That opened me up to, the cash flow quadrant, the ESBI. So, employee, self-employed, have a business, or be an investor. And I figured out that I kind of wanted to be on the right-hand side of that quadrant. Although I love the military, I love my job, I love what I do. It pays the bills. It helped me get to where I'm at. But I think that we all in this country should look to own a business as well. The tax advantages are better for the business owners. There's so many different benefits of having a business, especially a business that's profitable. So those are some of the things, at least that I've seen for some of the people that I've mentored. Uh, what about you? What do you think?
It's interesting because when you talk about fear, I do believe that's probably one of the number one, or the first stumbling blocks that people will get caught up in. Fear of the market going down, fear of losing your money. And I almost think it just takes the mindset of knowing that no matter what happens, as long as you keep getting up, you will eventually find a doorway, you can walk through. It's going to take time, might take a moment, as I always like to say. But it's, for me, I think it's, fear is probably the most common, threat to investors. And the other aspect is, I don't want to say a lack of intelligence, right? I too am a graduate of the University of Hard Knocks. So there's a massive learning curve. But I'd love to ask you, when it comes to your process in picking stocks, what is that even like? How did it start off? Were you always a dividend investor, or did you go day trading first, or like how did you get started? How did your process evolve? And can you talk to us about your process these days?
Absolutely. So, no, I was a terrible investor starting out. I didn't know anything. I would literally just watch Money Talks, and I watched Kramer, and then I would look up what Warren Buffett was investing in, and I would just throw money at it. And I would have like 200 stocks that I'm putting like $2 in a piece, you know, over time. Like, I had no clue what I was doing. Then I tried like day trading, fell on my face. right? Fell on my face day trading, but I just kept buying stocks over time, and I would set it up automatically, right? So I would lose the money, day trading. I would lose the money. Try to trade options. Uh, I lost money there too, and then so I stopped trading options. Then, the options market just went crazy during COVID. I mean, you didn't even have to be a good trader. You could just go on Robinhood and just put like Tesla and then pick 2 weeks, and write like 5 contracts and make some money, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but me, right, being a little hesitant, I waited till the market started crashing and I started trying to, write calls and I lost all my money, you know. So, now, like I said before, I do buy and hold. So, I got the TSP. It's automatic. It comes out, my payroll. I have the regular TSP and I have the Roth, and I split up, 3 different funds that I kind of invest in, and that's automatic. That's like the base. Then I have other accounts, which I build them for other different reasons. One is Schwab, one is Charles Schwab, one at M1. I love M1, and I'll tell you why I like M1 next. And I have another account I'm not going to talk about. And then I have my last account that I actually actively trade in is my Robinhood account. And so I mean, now being a little bit more seasoned, I can read charts. Okay. I'm always in the news. I'm looking at CPIs. I'm looking at, what the Fed is, things of that sort. So I know when to kind of start making moves if I'm going to do swing trading. But for the most part, I like to just buy and hold because for me, that's what's been proven that works for me over time. It kind of takes the emotion out of it, right? Because although you're reading charts and things, that's sort of like it's a little psychological as well, right? That you just like, oh, I think SoFi is just going to go up. No analytics, right? Like I just think people, that they had their earnings said that they were profitable for their first quarter. Most definitely, it's going to then it tanks, right?
Then you're hitting the
But
sell.
so now, yeah, exactly. So, right. But now it's mostly just buy and hold. And I try to buy, companies with good balance sheets, most of the time good PE ratios. And then sometimes you're taking a chance here or there on a company, right? Like you look at some of these EV companies that are getting beat right now. Someone's going to reign supreme, right? So maybe you go with a recognized brand that is Tesla. But maybe you might say, you know what? I think Lucid actually has the best EV. They're getting beat right now, but I think they can have a comeback. But it has to be based off of something for me. Now, I'll go onto the company's website. I'll look at their new products. I'll look at how they advertise. And then for me, I always look at what the younger generation is doing as well, right? So guys like me in their 40s, we're kind of like set in our ways, right? We deal with banks. But the younger generation are going to be dealing with companies like SoFi, like fintech is the future. This is just, my opinion, of course. I think fintech is the future. I think the one-stop shop of banking is going to be the future moving ahead. Student loans, you're talking about banking, being able to buy, stocks, being able to get personal loans, home loans, things of that sort. I think the newer generation likes that type of banking. And so, I'll move on a company like that, and I'll look at the analytics, and I'll, give it a go, and then sometimes I'll, dump some money in, but mostly I like to dollar cost average. For me, every day I buy stocks every day. I don't care if it's $5 VOO. I'm gonna buy something every day because for me, it's like I'm getting richer every day. Like today, AGNC paid out their dividend. I'm like, oh man, just got a little bit richer today. And it might only be a couple $100, you know?
Sure.
But I just got richer. And so for me, growing up, I didn't really like video games. I've always liked strategy games. So I would like to play like chess, checkers, maybe Uno, things I've always liked, strategy. And so I take that same, mentality to invest. Like part of my strategy is to continue to buy. Doesn't matter, market's high, market's low. Same thing with real estate. It's all about 2 to 3 steps down the road for me, if that makes sense.
No, I love that strategy. Continue to buy. I mean, I think that's another aspect. I think people will buy something and then just stop and kind of wait and watch like what's going to happen. And it's like you got to keep feeding, if you will, the furnace, right? Keep putting the money in there for compounding to really take effect. You mentioned VOO. I'm curious to know what are the 3 funds that you invest into?
Oh man. So of course I love EOO. uh, VTI, of course, SCHD. I can go on TUGN. I like, I mean, I think VOO. So most people, when they ask me what should they invest in, I'm like, well, how much are you looking to invest? If they say $50, $100, $200, like a nominal amount, I always point them towards either VOO and VTI, and I kind of tell them, what it is. VO pretty much tracking the S&P, VTI total stock market index, which they kind of almost like the same thing. But I try to push them to that area, and I let that be their base, and then I'll give them a couple of other stocks or suggestions for them to do their own research on to potentially add, to their portfolio. I actually wrote down, I think SCHD, and I think you had a video about SCHD, if I
I did.
remember correctly. Yeah, it's a really good video. SCHD is a great fund, not only for the dividend, which I think is what, at 3.5 or 3.9, something like that, but for growth as well. So I've been, telling people, I would potentially add something like this to my portfolio as well. And so those are the ones that I really like to push and suggest to people. And then as they're in the game a little bit longer, introduce them to QQ, different funds on the NASDAQ, and then tell them like how it could potentially balance out their portfolio and why.
Sure. And when would you say is a good point in time to start picking individual stocks? Because I feel like everybody loves to jump right in, start picking individual stocks. Most of us learn a lesson that you should probably build you call it a base, I call it a foundation. But that base or foundation, it's like, that was probably the first step. And now I can add some individual stocks. When do you know it's time to start adding those individual stocks? And I'd also love to know how many individual stocks you now have in your portfolio, considering first it sounds like you loaded up on them, but now it sounds like you got the strategy down pat. So where are you today with individual stocks?
All right, so first, I think people should add individual stocks in accordance with their tolerance, right? But understand what they're getting into. It and this social media age, like when I started to where we're at now, this social media age, like on TikTok, I drop Money Mondays and I'll say, hey, look, this is a fund that I like and I'm adding to my portfolio. But there's a gazillion people out here, doing the same thing, right? And they'll have guys that have been options trading for like 10 years come and say, I made $10,000 today. So you guys should just load up on Tesla and write some contracts. And they'll put a rocket emoji beside it. And now they got all these people boosting up the stock like AMC, or they're on Reddit saying, hey, everybody invest in this. You know, I think everything is based off of your tolerance. Me now, like I said, I have multiple accounts for different things. All right, so let's see. In my active Robinhood account, which I actively trade in, that's maybe 200, 250 grand, something like that. That one I think I have maybe 15,
Yeah.
and then I'll go with growth. I'll go growth first, and then then I'll take profits, and then I'll dump it into dividends. Because again, at first I wasn't a dividend investor. This is later on. This is maybe 2, 3 years ago. I started going into dividends when I actually saw okay, I broke $1,000 a month, right? I need to go a little bit harder. Like this actually does work, right? So most of my money is in growth stocks, and I changed my investment strategy to answer your question. Like at first, I was just growth. I just wanted to build a big nest egg, and I wanted to just keep buying real estate and stocks, real estate stocks, real estate and stocks. But then I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I might not necessarily want to work forever. I don't even know if I'm going to work when I get out of the military. Maybe I'll start a new business. I don't know what I want to do, but I would like to have money that comes in that I don't have to do anything for. It's 100% passive. Real estate is really not passive. I still have to manage my property managers. Sometimes I even work on the houses that I have, just depending if I have the time, right? But I still have to do something to manage it. But dividend investing is 100% passive. I put the money in and I get something back. And me personally, I like the monthly dividend payers like Realty Income, AGNC. I like what's like QYLD, cover ETF, things of that sort. Because I want to generate more income now. I want to get, a dividend portfolio up where it's, generating if you get up to about 1 million and you're at somewhere around a 6% yield, you get about 60,000 a year. If I can get half of that, I'm actually pretty cool because I get a pension from the military and I got real estate and some other things coming in. So I'd like enough to just cover my mortgage and maybe buy me a Porsche or something.
What would you say to people who, and I get this one a lot, right? Why not just go all growth, stay all growth? Because, let's be honest, dividends and dividend investing is just a strategy. It's going to take you a heck of a long time to accomplish wealth.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, uh, a lot of people who I see invest in growth, a lot of my friends, right? It's kind of like for your ego. It's like I have $1 million in Apple stock. It's really for your ego because eventually you're gonna have to pinch off that, right? You're gonna have to sell it at some point to kind of live off of it, unless you borrow off of it. Like if you have M1 or some other brokerages, you can actually borrow off of your portfolio and then use that money and go into other investments. That's one of the reasons, like I said, why I like M1. If I have $200,000-300,000 in M1, I can borrow up that money and put a down payment down on the house, fix it up, refi it, get a cash out refi, pay myself back. Right now, I have a property that already borrow money most likely for the loan, but like for down payment or to be able to fix it up. I'm my own bank at this point, and so me personally, I, I'm not looking. I mean, of course, I would like a little bit of growth, right? But for me, I want to generate income. So there's investors out there that just want the growth. They just want this big nest egg of Apple stock. And for me, I know that the markets go like this, and I don't know when necessarily I'm going to retire or when I may want to, pinch off of my nest egg. But if I'm invested in dividend kings and dividend aristocrats, sorry, I'm most likely still going to be able to get the dividend, even if they kind of lower it a little bit. And then I heard Kevin O'Leary say that he would never buy a stock unless it had a dividend, and I was sold. I was like, if Mr. Wonderful says it's great, then I'm gonna go with Mr. Wonderful. He's like one of my favorite sharks. My Shark Tank.
That's a deal. That's a deal. I'd love to know. So you love the monthly dividend stocks. Does it matter though in the long run, in your perspective, whether they're monthly payers, quarterly payers, or just matter that they pay the dividend? Because there's this whole argument that's out there, right? No, no, no. Quarterly is better than monthly. No, monthly is much better than quarterly. You got to go monthly.
Yeah, I like the mixed bag personally. I like the mixed bag. I like some of the monthly stuff because I think that you know eventually I'm going to want some of that income, right? And the monthly ones will provide me the monthly income, and then I'll get a bonus on the quarterly ones. Every quarter, at the end of every quarter, I'll get a bonus there. So for me, I like the mixed bag. Definitely understand why some investors like only monthly. Those guys that definitely need the income, like here and now, or they're later in their lives, really need the money. If I was younger, I probably would go with quarterly, but I'm a little bit older. I'm in my 40s now. I know I'm closer to maybe not working soon, like probably when I retire from the military. So for me, I want to generate the monthly income. But there's an argument to be made about both. I know I'm kind of like on the fence about your question, but it just depends on what type of investor you are and what your lifestyle is and what you need the money for and when you'll need the money.
Sure, timeline is huge. And speaking of timeline, I'm then curious to know as the stock market, right, as time goes on, right, and we're all somewhere in the mix, older investors, younger investors, the market volatility is just a whirlwind of fun, we'll say that. And fear tends to creep in for a lot of us. Of course, those who are, 40s, 50s, 60s in retirement already, much scarier. But even those who are younger and watching this volatility and saying the market will never recover, this is a question I usually ask everybody who jumps on, and I'm quite interested to know your answer based on your background in the military. How do you develop, confidence in what you're doing? How do you train, yourself to remain calm in the face of fear? And in our case here, it's volatility in the market, right? Ton of fear from that. But can you train that? Where do you start?
People ask me this question all the time, believe it or not. So for me, I went through '08. I went through losing half my 401k. I went through essentially doing a deed in lieu of a foreclosure, having to wholesale a house. I just put a bunch of money into it and losing out on it. I went through the pandemic when the government told people they didn't have to pay me their rents. Um, and I still made my mortgage. I didn't go into forbearance. I still paid the mortgage. And I never even recouped that money. I never tried to because I understood, you know. And so for me, I lost money during the pandemic on real estate, but I made crazy money in the stock market. For me, I know sometimes both are up, one's up more than the other. So for me, no matter what, I'm getting paid. For me, the money that I still continue to invest. Like I've faced fear. For me, uh, fear is fear is not a factor. It's that little evil that disintegrates you from the inside out. You have to learn how to face it and control it. In my job, I'm in all types of sticky situations at times. I do something what's called box breathing, where you go into these breathing exercises. It's almost the same thing, same breathing techniques you do in kind of like yoga or whatever. Yoga, it's like 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. I think I'll go into box breathing. I'll go 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out. It'll slow my heart rate down, and I can think clearly. So in the face of danger, right, or when things are not going well, you have to slow everything around you down, and you have to figure out where the opportunity is. Because when things start to crash, there's always an opportunity. There's opportunities. If the stock market crashed today and I lost half of my net worth, I still own the stocks. People shop at Walgreens, 7-Eleven, et cetera, et cetera. Whoever the triple net leases that Realty Income owns, that money's coming back eventually. Okay. I just have to wait it out. And so my mentality is that when things go wrong, harder in the stock market. Interest rates are crazy high, but I did a DSCR, so debt service coverage ratio loan for a 2 bedroom, one bath that I bought in December, as a matter of fact. And that was the highest interest rate that I've ever got. But I bought the deal right, and I was still able to cash flow $500 a month. And so eventually, what I'm going to do is, interest rates go down. I'll wait, I'll refi, and I'm going to make even more money over time. And someone else is paying the mortgage, and mortgages go up every year. Sorry, not mortgages, rents. Rents go up every year. So for me, where I'm at currently in my life, it's like c'est la vie. You know, it's like c'est la vie. One's going to be down, the other one's going to be up. I still have money coming in, or if I have less money coming in, I live at that means, and I still invest no matter what. Market's up, market's down. I have no fear. I have no fear whatsoever.
I want to go on the opposite side of that script because there's the folks who get very fearful and completely, kind of shock up and just stop. They freeze. And on the other end, there's the folks who load up, right? The 200 positions, the 300 positions, let's buy everything. And I want to ask you, how many positions are actually manageable in a portfolio? And how do you go about managing, right, when all is against you or in the face of volatility? How do you continue to manage? What do you look for?
Yeah, I think you really go with stuff that you like. Now, every once in a while, you got to, drop a couple of duds, um, and reposition your portfolio. And like I told you, I break my portfolio down to about 4 accounts. I don't really have to manage the TSP, right? It's essentially set it and forget it. M1 is kind of the same. The same amount of money goes in every month, and I break it down to that's mostly, I use M1 for mostly my NASDAQ stuff. Schwab is like IRA stuff, long-term stuff. So that's where you're going to have like your McDonald's, your Walmarts, some aristocrats, and then a little bit of growth stuff, a fund or two, here or there. So the one that I really actively manage the most is like Robinhood. I'm dropping stuff, I'm adding stuff. I might put a long put in, like I got a couple long puts in right now. I think that, some stuff's going to go down. If it hits, I'll take what I made and I'll dump it into Realty Income, or whatever. And so this stuff going to go down. A lot of times when stuff goes down, I try to find extra money to dump into there. Actually, I'll give you a prime example. So I bought into Realty Income when it was trading at about $75 a share. I think it's trading now in the 50s, right?
Low
So I've
50s.
lost, I don't know. Yeah, I've lost 10, 15 grand, but I still buy it every month. I'm going to bring my average down. So that's my strategy. I still buy it every month, even if I only buy 10 shares, or if I could buy 20 shares. Some months I might buy 20 shares. Some months I might only buy 5 or 10 or whatever, but I'm continually buying down my average continually. And I know over time I'll get what I want because I'm still getting the dividend, which doesn't account for that the money that I lost, at least the way it's calculated in the system on Robinhood. And so I think that one way to combat the fear and what you're talking about is to kind of stay in it and ride those waves, right? Because you could wake up one morning, and this has happened to me. You wake up one morning, you just made 10 grand in the stock market because Zoom took off in the middle of the pandemic, or Peloton took off in the middle of the pandemic, Tesla, like all these stocks that you look at the charts and the valuations, you're like, how is this even happening? You just never know what's going to hit, you know? And so my advice to your listeners is to just stay in it. Stay invested. Don't panic. Take a deep breath. Stay with your plan. Have a plan. Stick with it. It will be all right. It's only money. You can make more. Okay. The true asset, now, the true asset is time. The earlier you start, better. I started when I was 28, technically, right? Because I lost the money that I made from 18 to 28. I lost all that money. I started over at 28. I'm 43 now. Okay, that's what's that 15 years, and I was able to amass a $3 million portfolio, and I probably should be a little bit further along. If I'd be 100% honest with you.
The true asset is time, and money is, it's going to come and go at the end of the day. Now, every now and again, because I too am a buy, hold, Buffett type of investor, right? Buy and never sell, buy until I die, investor. But I've had to sell stocks based on red flags at certain points. And I'd love to know, when is the perfect time? I don't know to say perfect time, but when is it time to sell a stock? And what red flags do you look for if you have to sell?
Yeah, so I look, red flags are like, what is it, like workforce, like bad management, right? Or, you know, or you see that the business model really is really not working. People are not really using the products. Bad press sometimes, or like logistics issues like Peloton had. I was long on Peloton at one point, right? I had to dump them. I dumped them, and I think I recently bought back in because I heard that they did some deals with some other companies that I think there's some growth there in the long term. But that's what I look for. And you see the stock, or you see it on Reddit, and these guys are about to start shorting the stock. You might want to sell. You might want to sell and start over once those guys finish with what they're doing because they got a good group over there. So those are the red flags for me to usually, you know, I sell unless there's some, I mean, I have a lot of value. I have a lot of values as well, and so I usually also stick with companies who I think have morals. If that makes sense, right? Like I don't invest in things like, I don't invest in things that doesn't fit my brain, if that makes sense, right? So there's some stocks, even if there's money to be made there, I personally would not invest with them if they don't fit my brand and what I like. And I love REITs. I buy real estate. Why wouldn't I buy REITs, right? Why wouldn't I buy Realty Income? Why wouldn't I buy AG and C, Main Gain, all those, different types of, REITs, because that fits my brand. That's what I am. I'm a, buy and hold investor in real estate and stocks. So um, things outside of that, I usually shrink my portfolio if they don't fit my brand, or those other things that I've already previously discussed.
Touched upon something that I typically talk about, which is management, and how important management teams are in terms of growing a company, or literally to heck with a company sometimes, as we can see currently with some of them out there. Based on your experience, what 2 cents can you give us about management teams, good, effective management teams. How do we know when a company's management team is on par? And how do we know when we should stray away from a company's management team and get out of that investment because of that team?
Yeah, so for me, it's always looking at the news, right? Or watching Kramer and seeing the different CEOs who come on and really, and, or CNN or whatever, and really listening to what they're saying, right? Listening to them and their product, um, and what they have to say about it. Especially if it's a product that, has got bad press. Are they going to be honest about it? Because, I mean, people, I mean, at this point in time, like, this is the information age. You can you can find a lot of information if you know where to look on the internet, about different companies, managers. What companies have they been at before? Did those companies go belly up? I mean, look at these companies who they'll have great press. Hey, we just decided to pay all of our drivers $100,000 a year, and then a couple weeks later, it's like we just laid off 7,000 people. you know, like, but see, most investors, right? They're gonna run to it, be like, okay, they don't have to pay their workforce, their human capital, so their profits and revenues are most likely gonna go up. Whereas though for me, I'm gonna go through it with a fine tooth comb and say, okay, is this a company that I want to be in business with? Do I want to be an owner of this company? Because essentially, once you buy that share, you are an owner in that company. You are a shareholder. Okay, you're on the right side of that cash flow quadrant. And so for me, I really pay attention to the press, the news, what the CEO says. And right now, I haven't really been adding a lot of things to my portfolio. So the companies that I have are just the ones that I have, and I'm just pressing them as much as I can. Some more than others, right? Especially because my active account, I've been working that a little bit more. No, that's pretty much how I do it.
I have an interesting question for you, and we'll go back in time for this one and just reflect back, right, to your younger years, what you were doing throughout the day. And if I were to say to you right now, Marvin, we can put an hour into each day, you know, each and every day from your younger years, an hour into each of those days. So instead of 24 hours, you get 25 hours. What would you do during that one extra hour to ensure that you'd be further along than you are today?
Outside of spending it with my family, if I took a look back at my younger self and was able to give myself some advice, I would have figured out how to start a business on the internet. I would have took that extra hour to truly understand the internet, how to code, how to build websites, things of that sort, how to generate extra money younger to be able to invest over a longer period of time. So imagine if I took 1 hour and I built your website for you, and I was able to do that, and I was charging, 1,000, 2,000 bucks, whatever it costs, and I was able to pump 10 of those out a week with that extra hour when the internet was in its infancy. Uh, that's the way I look at things now. When it comes to time and if you knew then what you know now, like who knew the internet was going to take off the way that it has? Like I would have figured out a way to monetize YouTube when it first started. Because there was only a couple of people. When I say a couple, there's thousands, right? But it wasn't what it is now, where everyone's fighting for attention. So that's what I would have done. I would have figured out a way to monetize the internet more and took that money and invested, probably in tech stocks.
See, it's interesting. So I don't know if you know the author Grant Sabatier. He was actually he published a book really on the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Wrote a phenomenal book. Graduated from the University of Chicago actually a year before my brother had graduated from there. And I read his book and I was blown away by it. And at this point in time, he wasn't the big shot that he is now. But he actually did exactly what you said that you do at that hour. And he started with websites, just building websites for lawyers. And then from there, it just got into investing. But it's also interesting. So you said you'd go all tech. Why not go all tech now?
I'm in a decent spot now, and I do invest in tech, but I just don't think that it fits again what I'm trying to do. I'm still trying to just generate more income. Like, listen, compound interest is working right now while you and I are talking. I'm going to get there. Hopefully I don't get to spend all of this and I leave, this money to my kids. I'm going to sell off some of my real. I was actually coming up like right now the plan of when to start selling off some of my real estate portfolio. And I'm going to take that money and I'm going to put it into dividend stocks. And now with the information that I have, I can go all tech. I'll just find I can go TUGN. I can go with a tech covered call ETF that pays a dividend and help generate money. I could put 300 in there and be all right. So I might go all tech in a fund that pays a dividend in the future. Yeah, because I'm going to sell off probably half of my real estate portfolio at some point. I'm just going to keep half of it. Yeah.
Marvin, what advice would you give to your kids in terms of investing, work ethic, everything in between? How could they get to where you got without going through probably, I want to say, half the battlefield that you went through?
Yeah. So, I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. So my 16-year-old, like I told you, when I had the lawn service business, lawn care service business, he would go out with me and we'd cut yards all day Saturday and Sunday, and I'd pay him. And he'd take the money that I paid him and he would put most of it into, stocks. So he's 16. I think he has about maybe 10 grand in stocks right now. 16, right? My 12-year-old's a little lazy, but he's coming along, right? He at school, the teacher asked him, Jaden, what do you want to do when you grow up? He's like, I'll probably just buy some apartment buildings and rent them out and be a landlord. So, you know, you don't think your kids are watching and you don't think that they're listening, but they're learning through osmosis, right? Like my youngest son, my 12-year-old, he'll say, Dad, we're rich. I'm like, no, I'm rich. You got to figure it out. I look my 16-year-old dead in his face and I tell him, I'm not paying for you to go to college. That's not a good investment for me. You might want to get a scholarship. But I have money set aside for them. But I want them to learn from me. And I don't want to preach to them all the time, but they're learning by watching me and seeing what I do. Family is very important to me. We went to Puerto Rico this last weekend. That was very important for me to meet them there and have a good time there. And I think that some of the best advice that I can give them is the way that they see me live my life, right? Just trying to do the best that I can to be a stand-up man, serving my country, investing in my community. You think about it. I was homeless, Ari. One of the reasons why I got into real estate is because I wanted to provide affordable housing to people. I looked to help people. Some of my margins are really good. Some of my margins are not so good. I have people who live in some of my apartments that I could be getting another $400 a month. But I see the individual that works there and I keep the rent low because I know that that's what that individual can afford. And people ask me, why don't I just raise the rents sometimes because my rents are below market? And I always tell them, things come to me in abundance, you know? And if I continue to do right by people, if I continue to do right my community, for my country, you know, uh, I'm not missing any meals. Sometimes more money is not necessarily answer. Like you can literally, I mean, everybody wants more money, right? But for me, it has to fit my brand, it has to fit my morals. I have to feel good about doing it. And so I want the same thing for my kids, right? If I leave this earth today, my tenants to live there, the rents that I have them at, I wouldn't want them to raise those rents. Okay. Just do right by the people and everything will work itself out, right? And so yeah, for me, that's what it's about. Just them seeing me, what I'm doing, and then I do talk to them about assets, investing, going to college, building business. My oldest son, he wants to be an engineer. I think he wants to do systems test or engineering. Um, and so I tell him, I was like, go after your passion, do what you want to do. But at the same time, think about a business that you potentially want to start and, like what your investment strategy is going to be. moving forward in your life. You don't have me telling you what stocks you should probably invest in. So,
Yeah, if we look into the future a little bit here, because now we've made our way into 2024 and we actually expected interest rate cuts. Looks like they'll probably be pushed out a little further into the distant future. But macro wise, even you said you use macros quite a bit with your strategy. Can you talk to us about the importance of macros, if they matter at all for investors, especially dividend investors?
all right. So I actually wrote down some things that I was optimistic about and pessimistic about. So I wrote down that I was pessimistic about inflation and political and monetary issues that we kind of have in this country. I'm pessimistic about um, we'll probably have another mild recession. Just credit card use is through the roof. Americans are in more debt than they've ever been in. People are dipping into their 401ks, et cetera. I'm pessimistic about consumer spending higher than the rate of their income or their income growth, layoffs from big businesses. I'm kind of pessimistic about that. The things I'm optimistic about is that, according to the numbers, our economy is still strong. So I don't know how this math works, but the economy's still strong. I'm optimistic about rates going down. I think rates will probably start going down sometime in the summer. People will start buying homes. They're going to figure out a way. And what we usually do, and what the banks usually do, is they come up with new products, right? They come up with new funding products. 50, you can get a 50-year loan, a 60-year loan. You can do a jumbo. You can. There's so many different products that you can use. Like for my business, my LLC, I use debt service coverage ratio. Like I'm going to pay a little bit more, but it's 100% under my LLC. People will figure out ways to get home. I am optimistic about tech companies, believe it or not, and the Magnificent Seven. Usually, whichever way they go, the market goes. I'm optimistic about me continually being vested. I'm optimistic about REITs and real estate and commercial real estate potentially coming back around um, the more we grow as a country. And those are the things that I wrote down. So I do look at the macros. I look at what's going on in the world. Look at the potential conflicts with other countries. I look at CPIs. I look at all of that stuff. Some of that stuff is fear. You actually have to go into the actual websites of like Federal Reserve, IRS, like whatever your research. Actually go into those websites and look at the actual reports and see what's actually in them. This stuff is public knowledge that no one actually looks at. They just listen to someone on CNN that's pumping some type of, and I'm just using that as an example. I'm not bashing CNN. They just watch, the news and take whatever someone says as the gospel. That's not how life really works, right? Go look at the data. One of my best friends, he's an engineer. He says, always go with the data. Always go with the data. So I go and I look at the data, and that helps fuel my positions. But another thing for me, in a macro sense, the way I invest based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you
Mm.
look at the base of the hierarchy of needs, it's like food, shelter, those are the things that I invest in mostly, right? You look at real estate, REITs, things of that sort. Like people have, these businesses, brick and mortar businesses, they rent or have triple net leases from realty income, AG&C, the mortgages, things of that sort. Like, so for me, people are always going to need somewhere to live, and they're always going to need food, water, things of that sort. So, for your listeners out there, I would look at some of those stocks as well, because in the macro sense, no matter what, those are things you're always going to need.
I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I know that you have a massive following on Instagram, and I think you said TikTok as well. So I'm going to point blank ask you, Marvin, if any of these viewers out there want to follow you for more suggestions, advice, insights, which, by the way, a whole heck of a lot of them as I've been following Marvin's channels. Marvin, where can we find you?
All right, so you can find me on TikTok at Oscar Mike Speaks, all one word. Oscar Mike Speaks means on the move speaking. So I'm speaking things to fruition. You can find me on Instagram, same thing, at Oscar Mike Speaks. I'm at Gmail, Oscar Mike Speaks at gmail.com. I just started my TikTok page. I only have maybe a couple of hundred followers. I do this thing called Money Mondays. I've been doing it for a couple of weeks where I'll drop a stock or a fund that I'm invested in or that's in my portfolio, and I'll talk a little bit about it. And then I'll also, I've been using tip ranks in the
There
background.
you
I don't know if you, I know you saw it, and where it kind of breaks down the different funds, and I think that's easier for the newer investors. So, it's an awesome tool for your listeners to look up, download the app. I love it. I think they should, try it out. It definitely has a lot of great information on there.
So if I were to give you $10,000, Marvin, what stock would you invest in to literally buy and hold?
And this is a tough question because originally I was going to answer this question. You give me 10 grand right now, I'll probably put it in Bitcoin. Bitcoin hit 72,000 today, man. I'll probably put it in Bitcoin and then cash it out once it goes up a little bit higher and put it into me being a buy and hold investor, just dump it into SCHD. But that's me, right? Because I love dividends. So for me, I'd pump up my SCHD or realty income. I'd pump up something that I already uh, have. Now, for your listeners, if I had $10,000 and I didn't have the portfolio that I have right now, I probably would put it in VOO or VTI, and then I would press it every month, whatever I could afford. If it was $50, $100, $200, $2,000, whatever, and I'd press it until I got to at least 100 grand. Then I'd add something else onto it.
That's exactly how that's done and done right. Marvin, I want to say thank you so much again for joining me on Masters of the Market. I want to say thank you for your service to this country. Absolute respect and appreciation, admiration for you. Keep doing exactly what you're doing, inspiring a lot of people. Again, investors, go check him out on his channels there. And until next time, we will see you all there.